Welcome to the special meeting of the Shelburne Select Board on Tuesday, October 15th, 2019, which I now call to order. The next item is to approve the agenda. I have one recommendation to my colleagues, and that is that we defer item number 12, property tax collection policy, to the next meeting for reasons of we have had a review from the town attorney, which none of us have had adequate time to take a look at. And as well, Lee, who is on vacation, is the tax collector, so it seems to make sense to postpone that until reschedule that for the next meeting.
Move to approve as amended.
Jamie moves.
Second.
Colleen seconds to approve as amended. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. Mary is not going to be present this evening. The next item is to approve Select Board meeting minutes. You'll indulge us a little bit because we have four of these to do. In the case of August 6th, it would be myself, Colleen, and Mike. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Mike moves to approve August 6th. Colleen?
Second.
Colleen seconds.
Sorry.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Jamie not voting for reason of having not been present. In the case of September 10th, we were all present. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Jamie moves.
Was I here?
Colleen
I was not here.
not here for that one.
I was not
This
here.
was
It came in.
I think that was a different
That's the next.
meeting. Anyway, we have three
Okay.
to
Yeah.
vote on it, so
Yeah, I'll
she
second.
can abstain.
Oh, I was by phone for part of it. That's what it was, but I'll just abstain from it.
Okay.
Okay. Jamie moves. Mike seconds. And is there any discussion? Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Colleen abstaining. The next is September 16th. That is all of us.
Right.
In which case, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Colleen moves.
Second.
Jamie seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Oh, sorry. There was one thing, even though I wasn't part of this. The date on it was 9/24/11, and it should be 9/24/19. Just grammatical.
Yes, in the case of, it's so noted, will you make that editorial change, Peter, on September 24? Those who would be voting would be Mike, Jamie, and Mary. And since Mary is not present, we have to reschedule that
On which one?
on the
This-
24th.
On the 24th.
Shelburne Select Board meeting minutes,
Yeah.
9/24. It says 11.
Yep. So Mike, correct. Yeah, that was the economic development. Okay.
And that would bring us to October 1. Mary, Mike, Colleen, and myself accepting Jamie, and we have three. Is there a motion to approve October 1?
I don't have minute meetings.
Mike moves.
Do you have?
Do you have minute meetings?
I don't have. I
No,
didn't
I
see
don't have
minutes for
those.
the first either.
It is after the sign-in sheet for the
Oh, okay.
economic development.
That was the one-time
That was that
brief
the
special
special meeting.
Oh, okay.
executive session.
Gotcha. Let's see it.
Yep.
That was not there.
Okay.
Okay, so moved.
Mike moves and Colleen seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. Jamie not voting, Jamie abstaining. Thank you.
Can I just ask on minutes as a general matter? Is Mary Ann no longer?
That's a
Taking
very
minutes?
good
She
question.
is.
She is. Okay.
Some of the ones that are off schedule, Lee may be doing instead, but the
Okay.
routine ones.
I
should
just
have to
didn't
go
know. They all
instead.
seem to be Lee's notes, which are
The
great. It's hard
ordinary
to
does
do
the
two things
special
at once,
ones
but
and the out of order ones.
okay.
Yeah, they're like a different format.
Okay.
Okay.
Next item is public comments. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment, an observation? Hearing none, seeing no hands. The next item are select board comments. Mike?
I'll wait. I see we have an agenda item on the Economic Development Forum. I would like to say that since Lee is not here, the pancake breakfast was awesome as usual. So great pancakes.
Colleen,
I have nothing to add.
No comment.
Jamie? The only comment I would make is to keep your eye on the weekend after next. It's the Halloween parade. You don't have to be walking around in it to enjoy it. You could do both. You had more energy than I do, but it's a really fun time. We'll have wonderful weather for sure. And please keep that time and day in mind, Sunday the 27th. The next item is the town manager report. Lee, do you want to read Lee's or make and add to it your own?
Yeah, I can add what Lee has. First of all, I guess to congratulate Lee. The reason I'm sitting here is he's on his honeymoon. He was married this past weekend. He and Carol are off on their honeymoon, so wish them well. Some of the notes that Lee had left for the meeting, he wanted to highlight that the town did receive a $30,000 energy efficiency grant from Green Mountain Power for some of the work that was done in the library and town hall project. So that's a good win to get that kind of funding to offset some of the cost of that equipment. He's also looking at having Efficiency Vermont look at some of the town buildings and see what we can save there for efficiency lighting and other measures to reduce our electric consumption there. Just to note, we do have 2 openings in our police dispatch center. 2 employees, Ian Kilburn and Angela Shagnon, recently moved on to other jobs, so we do have 2 openings there if anyone's interested in applying for that job. And I believe we have 1 full-time opening in the police department for a full-time police officer. In assessing and getting ready for the reappraisal in 2023, we've hired a part-time person to assist with that, Courtney Brown. So she'll be going around helping inspect properties as that project kicks off, it's a 3-year process, but needs to get going, so they're getting organized for that. And that position is actually paid for. The state allocates funds for reappraisal to towns each year. So a large part of that project will be paid from those funds without taxpayer money. Also wanted to acknowledge Eric Harris O'Brien, who's doing our VCAM broadcast tonight. Eric is the chief executive of VCAM, and he is moving on to another position. But I want to say, I think Dean would agree, working with Eric, anytime we ask for meeting coverages, can you be at this meeting, can you be at that meeting off schedule? He always bends over backwards to get VCAM here. The equipment upgrades that we've done in this room, a lot of that is Eric's initiative too. So Eric, we wish you well, and thank you for your work getting the public broadcast here going for sure. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you. You certainly have our appreciation as well. Best wishes and all the success in your next venture.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter. The next item are applicants for CBC positions. We have 3, one of which is an applicant for a position on the library trustees. Charlotte Albers, would you be thrilled to come up to the mic and give us your name and just 82 seconds of why you look forward with great enthusiasm to this job?
I have a cough drop in my mouth, so excuse me for not speaking completely clearly. No, I've been a resident of the town since 2006 when our family relocated from out of state, and I've been a frequent patron of the library. My profession is landscape design, so I've been involved with the library in its old building and in its current building. I've been a member of the team that has worked to bring about the new building and landscape, so that's been really gratifying to see. And I'd just like to continue to serve and I understood that there was a need for somebody new to come on board. And I'm thrilled with the new space and all the potential for meetings, community connections, and adult and youth programming too. So it would be an honor to serve.
Well, thank you. Any questions of us?
No.
Anyone on the board have a question for?
Are the terms the same as other CBCs through April 2020?
I believe it's, that sound right, Ruth? That would be the term.
Do you know the term on?
Okay.
I'm actually taking a position
Kathy's?
that was vacated.
Good job. So I'm Ruth Hagerman, and I'm the ex-chair of the Library Board of Trustees. Lisa Merrill has taken over as the chair, but she doesn't actually have this answer right at the top of her head. So we have 3-year terms. We have bylaws that establish the length of those terms to keep them staggered. They have definite end dates. So Charlotte's picking up Kathy's term, which officially expires in April 2021. Okay. And then at that point, then she would be eligible for 2 more 3-year terms. And then after that, she would have to take at least a year break, because we do have, I don't know if that's really term limits, but whatever you call that. So that's what she's picking up.
Got it.
All right.
Thank you,
Okay.
Ruth.
All right. Thank you.
Move to approve Charlotte Albers to the Library Board of Trustees for a term starting tonight and ending April 1st, 2021.
Moved by Colleen,
Second?
seconded by Jamie. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Welcome. Thank you.
Congratulations.
I've got a familiarity with the Department of Agriculture Graduate School in Maryland myself, and delighted to see that the whole skill set and expertise put to the best use of the town. And there's also a campus, an extended campus, in which the new library and town center is a central part. So there's probably some unlimited opportunity in altogether. So we're happy to have you. The next applicant is Mr. Kendall, who is applying for a position on the Planning Commission.
You're not Mr.
No.
Kendall.
If I may, he was definitely planning on being here, and just if I could put in a word for him, he's attended the last 2 planning commissions. He requested the packet. He's been engaged. He's following up on stuff and asking questions, and
Jumping in.
definitely
Has he
thrilled.
read the ethics ordinance?
Actually, that would not surprise me, but I can certainly check with him. He's been really proactive so far, and for what it's worth, the board we've been having some issues around quorum, so he would be a great addition to the board.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah. You got it.
Do you want us to wait until he arrives? If he's making the effort to come, happy to circle back on
I
it.
would be fine with that if it's not too much trouble.
We could just set it aside until he comes.
Then he's done. Then it's done.
I'm sure he'd be happy to come in and talk with you. Something may have delayed him because like I said, he's been pretty proactive about everything so far.
You want to jump to the next one, and then
Yeah.
maybe
Why
he'll
don't we
stroll
wait,
in?
because
Thank you, Jason.
we wouldn't want to deprive him of his TV spot.
That's right.
And the next applicant is Jordan Townsend, who is applying for a student member position on the Dog Park Committee.
Hello, I'm Jordan Townsend. I'm a sophomore at Vermont Common School. I love animals. I love dogs, cats, horses, any animal you can name. I've owned a dog my whole life, and I work at a horse barn with 8 dogs, so there's a lot, and I love them all. So I'm interested in the Dog Park Committee because I love dogs and helping them.
Well, good for you.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's really good news then. And you will be part of a local government as well, even, which you've given some indication is an interest as well. So we're delighted to have you. Do you have any questions of us or
No.
anyone else on the board? Any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Move to approve Jordan Townsend to the Dog Park Committee with a term starting tonight and ending April 1st, 2020. Right?
Colleen moves.
2022.
22.
Two?
Yeah. I assume it's a vacant.
Thank
There's
you.
no
You're a
other student.
sophomore, right?
Yeah.
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 Let's
okay.
make it 2027.
Yeah, we'll just keep going.
Thank you.
Thank you. We should vote on
Is
that. I don't think
Jamie was seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, nay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jordan, for taking the interest. And if Mr. Kendall shows up, you want to give us the high sign?
we can
I think
approve
we
him,
should
and
just
then if he
do it.
comes
Yeah.
in, we can
Yeah, we can
chat
still
and give
talk to him.
Give him his 2 minutes on TV.
All right, is
I
there a
don't think there's
motion
anything that he's
to,
going to say that we're going to say, oh.
is there a
I'm not
motion
so
to
sure
approve
now.
Mr. Kendall's application?
Move to appoint Stephen Kendall to, do you know the term, Jason? Is it 3? Move to appoint Stephen Kendall to the Planning Commission for a term beginning this evening and ending April 1, 2022.
I'll second that.
Moved by Jamie, seconded by Mike. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, and those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you. The next item is a form-based zoning update, which Jason, as the chair of the Planning Commission, and Dean Pierce, is the head of Planning and Zoning Department, are going to provide us.
Yeah. We have copies of the slides too, if you want a hard copy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So my understanding is 10-minute just kind of run through overview sort of thing,
The
right?
check-in sort of on
Yeah.
where
Excellent,
things are
on where
progressing,
things
and
are.
then I think we had asked for just a little bit of data on applications, what the
Some quantitative
status
sense
of,
it, yeah.
right.
All right. So first, just from an overview perspective, and I'll do my best not to just read what everybody else can read, but in essence, the idea behind it was to promote economic activity and development, streamline the regulations to a degree, make it a bit easier in town, put a bigger emphasis on the actual design of buildings and site layout, and less emphasis on the uses within the buildings. So the goal is just to give developers flexibility within, just give them more flexibility. Then along those lines, it emphasizes the building types, so it gives the form of buildings and what the public realm should look like around it in terms of just setbacks, what should be in the spaces around it, but developers still have latitude with what they do. So it starts with the regulating plan, which is a map of the Route 7 corridor, which is where this applies. There are different character districts included in that. Each character district has a set of building types that can apply to it, set of street types that would go around it. And that's the concept of the form, is just to provide that instead of saying, here's a strict set of regulations that you can do in these specific areas. It leaves a lot of openness for it. And we also do, through the process, and having just been through it a second time, is we always try to lean towards making permitting processes a bit more efficient. That's something that we talk about frequently. Sometimes that's difficult to do within the framework. So this is an overlay district. It's not mandatory. This is an optional one. We do have our standard regulations. At some future date, that may be something that that we want to investigate, and we've certainly talked about that. It's just a bit of a Herculean task and might involve a grant sometime down the line. It was adopted in 2016. There was a very minor change in 2017. 2018, the Planning Commission spent predominantly working on the town plan revision. But prior to getting into the town plan, the consultant that helped with the form-based code in general went back through and streamlined a little bit to try and make it more applicable based on preliminary feedback. And essentially, we put that on the back burner because the town plan took priority at the time. So the amendment that would be coming to you is essentially us going through those recommendations, and in the process took us longer than initially anticipated because, of course, side discussions happen and you end up making some other tweaks here and there where things didn't make sense. So in a nutshell, the changes that were made were the whole form-based zoning section, just in terms of a reformat and a renumbering. The regulating plan itself was simplified a bit. We made some clarifications. So the map that has the character districts, for example, there were 3 nodes that had been identified as let's concentrate in this area and make it a walkable area. One of the nodes that had been highlighted was where Champlain Lanes is. And we did have a developer come to us and talk about that spot, and just the layout of it and what else was around it, it didn't strike the Planning Commission as that being a great spot to have a node. So with the benefit of those discussions, we decided to remove that one. The building form and lot standards, we again went through. There were various minor tweaks here and there, sometimes with feedback that we had gotten from potential projects, other times just from what conversations that led to and some input from the public. Parking requirements as well, landscaping, screening, lighting, the stormwater, we have a big emphasis on that in general. That's another topic. We're looking to align the stormwater standards that we put into form-based codes into the current regulations, just so that there's consistency there. All of this, as a side note, is a little bit of a balance. We want to encourage form-based zoning because it's we have slightly tighter controls around things like stormwater management and things that would make the community better in terms of the initial design. Sorry, it's been a weird day and I lost my train of thought. But so we want to incorporate that into the current regs so that that those are equal, and that's not a deciding factor, but for a developer to say, I want to go with the old school one versus the new one. There were some updates made to the signage standards, again, with a lot of feedback that we've been hearing, and there are future changes to come as well, no doubt. Previously developed sites, lots of discussions around that, just to, from a form-based perspective, to try and make things more approachable. One of the biggest benefits to form-based from a developer perspective is that it allows for greater density. So that's one of the big attractions to it. And then heading down that path, we can align better across the board with some other initiatives that we're looking at. And then we also modified a few definitions just based on feedback and clarity. So in terms of statistics, yeah.
So the number of fully approved form-based zoning projects is still just one. It's the project that was mentioned, I think, in the Burlington Free Press or 7 Days, people asking, what's going up in Shelburne? That is Clint West, who has Maple Leaf Carpet and Cleaning. He's going to be moving his business into the ground floor, and the upper floor is going to be a series of apartments. So that's the fully approved form-based zoning project in Shelburne, led the way, actually came back a second time because of some deadlines that passed before. So he has been through the process fully. There is another project that I would say is well on its way to approval. That's the so-called Schenck project, which is located on the Yankee Doodle Motel site. And that consists currently of 48 units, 2 buildings with 24 units each of age-restricted housing. It was slightly larger, and having nothing to do with form-based zoning, But the developers looking ahead to Act 250, they were advised that there might be some wetland issues, and rather than delay the project to fully explore those, they scaled the project down. So one fully approved, one well on its way. There was one project that began the form-based zoning process quite some time ago. It ran into some resistance. One of the map changes that Jason mentioned was really the source of some conflict with neighbors. It had to do with creating a road or implementing a road that would be parallel to Route 7. Project was pulled back. However, the owner of the property has been in touch with us, has been to some of the planning commission meetings, and is well aware that as a result of these amendments, some of the things that held up her project could go away, and I fully would expect her to resubmit that under the revised regs. As Jason said, it is an optional set of regulations. It's got some incentives, some reasons why people would be attracted to it, and as an example, as he said, the bowling alley property, the Planning Commission has been approached. That would be 33 units, but there are some things that this proposed amendment addresses, although there are some other things that it may not. And then I think there are possibly other property owners that are waiting to see, because some of the waivers that would be possible under the revised version would help these folks. One of those is the Wheeler property.
And one other comment around waivers, just as a heads up, there was we had a developer come in who was doing some renovation in a neighborhood district, and the requirements in form-based require sidewalks and street trees. And the neighbors had indicated that just to have a sidewalk in front of the new development that was going in didn't make sense on the rest of the street. And the request from, the general request was to create a waiver that could give the DRB that latitude. And this kind of put us into a sticky spot, because in my view, speaking personally, if that waiver were to be granted, then it would be used and say, okay, don't put a sidewalk in here now. And then down the line, another development could happen. And then, well, it doesn't make sense to do a sidewalk now because there isn't a sidewalk anywhere else. So that waiver could just theoretically continue to be used. So through discussion, this ended up, we're referring this to the Bike and Path Committee to investigate options, perhaps, and I don't know how complicated this would be, just want to throw it out there, but to have something like a sidewalk fund or something, so that if a sidewalk development doesn't make sense in a particular place, at least have the developer contribute to that fund, and then out of that it could be distributed as needed based on sidewalk needs or future development needs. I know that could be a complicated thing, and I'm not sure how that works, hence the discussion that was going to be coming through that subcommittee, and that'll be raised at the appropriate time. That was, for what it's worth, something that the developer was certainly open to. Like, they're very understanding of the rules, just don't want to do things that make no sense at all at the time, and I can't disagree with that.
In terms of timetable, I think you might have mentioned it, Jamie, the hearing has been warned for November 14th.
Mm-hmm.
The hearing, the Planning Commission hearing.
Planning Commission hearing
Planning
on the set of revisions.
For the updated version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've had 3 applications, 3 or 4 approved.
Well, yeah, three bona fide have come in. They've been warned as that type, and like I said,
And we adopted the code when?
2016.
2016. Okay. And do you have the number on the existing code? So we've had 3 under the
total
form-based,
number of
total
other
in that
applications.
same geography.
I don't have that number.
Yeah, top of your head.
It's greater than 3. Yeah, I mean, if what you're wondering is,
I'm wondering why more people aren't opting in.
I think one reason is that they are not required to, and that one thing to keep in mind is that the zoning regs along the Route 7 corridor have been updated pretty continually since about 2008, and those included some pretty significant additions to the list of allowed uses and some upzoning. So as one example, I mean, there is a proposal that's come to the DRB. It was originally approved as 4 single-family lots, and I believe using conventional zoning on a large site as part of a PUD, they're looking in excess of 40. They're not using form-based zoning. I think in some ways a project would be better under form-based zoning, but they're not required to use it. They'd have even more potentially if they were to use form-based zoning, but they have an adequate number evidently because of the numbers working.
No incentive for the to speed of approvals if they were to, in that scenario, convert it to form-based?
Well, there are some things, as Jason said, there are a lot of different parts to this that still contribute to delays or a longer than ideal process. So I can't recall a developer saying, you know, this will really clinch it for me. They're also looking at these projects. They're also looking at Act 250. It's not like, I guess it would be more attractive potentially for a commercial project on a lot that's less than an acre, and they could, you know, not have to worry about Act 250, and they could look at a very quick approval under form-based
So
zoning.
it's nothing in the code itself. It's a state regulation or something external to
Well, I
what-
think there are some things that I think some of it is experience. As the board becomes more comfortable reviewing projects under form-based, it'll become an easier thing to do and things will happen more quickly. And I think some of the things that are being clarified will make the process go smoothly. One of the bullet points, the procedures relating to previously developed sites, I think is going to be an important contributor for people to come to the door and say, I want to use form-based zoning when they've got a project or a property that's already partially developed. Because one of the things that form-based zoning, as currently written, doesn't really answer is, what do you do? What's the development potential? How do you calculate it? This amendment would make the answer to that question very clear. It's very generous in addition. It would basically give people a very low land area requirement for their existing project, and then they can develop the rest of it under form-based zoning.
You're in a unique position in terms of Planning Commission and DRB, Dean. Is there any informal process along the lines of an exit interview whereby you ask developers why they opted not to go the form-based zoning path? I mean, do we have any systematic treatment of reasons why they're not opting?
We don't have a specific set of questions that we ask every developer to answer, but we do ask developers whether or not they had considered going through form-based zoning. And generally speaking, I would say that they are not using it if they feel that they don't need to get the benefits. Like I mentioned, there's this one residential project that's fairly substantial, and they feel with the land that they've acquired the rights to that they don't need that even larger number of units that would be possible under form-based zoning. Some developers we really haven't had that conversation with, but the conversations have been between other people in town. So the supermarket site is one example. I mean, I think it would have been great to have been approached by those folks to have the conversation and to try to encourage them to use form-based zoning, because I think the result would be a different type of project than what we're seeing.
Do we promote form-based? Are there pamphlets or educational material that promotes?
There are some pamphlets online. I'm not sure that they're doing a great job, but I do know that people have looked at them and have referred to them.
Yeah.
That was one of the products that the consultant did.
Is the updated version getting smaller? Is it more understandable? Is it more user-friendly? Is it more DRB-friendly?
I would say fewer lines, brighter lines is certainly a theme that we try to follow. Sometimes that's complicated. I appreciate the format.
Yeah,
I think
the
the
format is changing. It will look
Yeah.
different. It won't be oriented in this, so there is going to be an adjustment. But Brandy Saxton, who helped with this, who's really known around Vermont as someone who's good at taking things from version 1 to version 2 after the out-of-state consultants have left, she contributed a lot, I think, in terms of the layout, of getting rid of things that are duplicative and just cleaning things up, organizing them better. So I think it will be a more user-friendly document. People will pick it up and they'll absorb more of it when it's in its new form than they would have under the old form, I think. And it may make it more attractive.
Form-based is a national experience. Is there any sense of what other communities have recorded in the transition? I mean, is this kind of understandable and common that there'll be a transition period? And
I would say, I mean, we've looked to certain communities as having some kind of, they could be our model because they'll have major federally numbered routes, not interstates, going through their community. And in one community in Maine, they adopted form-based zoning, and then after it was adopted, they came back and they evaluated a lot of the standards, and they asked themselves, why did we choose this standard, and is it really the right standard for our community? That's a little bit more detailed work than what the Planning Commission did, although it has done a bit of that when it's taken Brandy's work. But it is an adjustment. And then there are other communities that have adopted form-based zoning where more than what Shelburne's version does, the authority to approve a major project comes down to basically one person. And you've read about the instances in Winooski where there has been some community concern that a major project could essentially be approved administratively by one person. And some communities look at that and they're struggling with whether or not they do want to balance things a little bit, that it is better for the community for things to move a little bit more slowly with more people involved.
I think just as a general comment, the form-based zoning process with the consultants that came in and had the public hearings and that sort of thing to get input, not hearings, but public input sessions that resulted in the original, that was before my time. But having been involved with this and spending some time in the current regulations, the form-based it's more approachable. I think the document itself is certainly more approachable. I think long-term, the interaction with developers has been very helpful, as well as residents and others that come in to provide feedback. And a long view sort of thing, I would like to see a standard set of regs so that there isn't the optional, it's what does Shelburne want? Let's move forward with this and try and keep it simple. Because there is just a lot to manage, and I can see it from anybody's perspective that this is just an overload of data. Where do we start? And there have been suggestions from working with local university students to put together okay, here's a process to step through. How would you approach a project? And just the nature of how work comes in, that's not something that we've gotten to yet, but there are options down the line.
thank you. Any questions? Any other questions?
What, Dean, you said the first bona fide form-based zoning site, where was that?
It's Clint West building. It's up at the intersection of Route 7. It's where there's the concrete being poured. It may be starting to be more than that at the intersection of Clearwater, I believe.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So this will probably be before us January-ish, I would imagine, if not before then.
Yeah, late December, maybe.
The amendments.
Yeah, the proposal.
Right. Okay.
And there's a long parking lot that's growing with topics that we didn't want to do the deep dive because we wanted to get this first passed. These amendments that have been sitting out since the end of 2017, we just really wanted to get those in there because from feedback that we've gotten, that is something that would enable more adoption of this.
Yeah, I mean, we've made a big investment in this. I'd like to see it being used more. That's my only reaction to it. I mean, I was involved with it, so I'm personally invested in it as well. So I want to check in at some point again in 6 months, maybe after we adopt the new code, and just take a pressure test of.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'd offer here to make myself available to any economic development process to see how that can interact, because this is all tied together. Yeah. And I think some of the things that we put in a parking lot, that would be really good feedback, just to really get an understanding of landowners, developers, what do people want, what are they willing to do, and then those are the types of changes that I think we'd want to move forward with. And
I would also like to see some collection of data on what are people saying about the process, or it'd be nice to, an exit interview is a great idea, or just some way to just get a snapshot of what are people thinking and why.
Yeah, even if we formalize the feedback loop, I mean, I know you're right on top of it, but that may be an area where we could help. I mean, we might be, you know, a positive factor in a feedback loop altogether, but, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Dean.
Thanks.
Any discussions or questions on the part of the audience? Hearing none. The next item is Shelburne Heights wastewater matter, a question of restitution. By introduction to this,
Wait, before you introduce, I need to recuse.
I was just about to say.
Oh, sorry.
Leaving Mike not much choice, but this item resulted from a petition from residents of Shelburne Heights. You may recall, in their petition, they identified 4 concerns. Restitution was one of those, and we, at the time, we concluded discussion of the first 2. We indicated that as a board we would return to this question at a point where our plate was a little less full and a little lighter than it was at the time, and this is the evening that we've scheduled to do so. I think it might be useful for us to invite whomever would like to speak. We do, as you can see from the length of the agenda, we do have some time concerns tonight. But please let us know what's on your mind, and we'll begin with whomever wishes to start. Tony.
Good to see you again. So before talking about restitution, I just wanted to take a few minutes to kind of catch you up to speed with what happened during the Act 250 process. I don't know, you know, it's a lot of paperwork and so on, so I'd imagine you're probably not, you know, following it as closely as we did. So basically, what happened was Bill argued about the as-built to Act 250, and they did agree that they were essential, and they required that the developer produce those, which he did. He was able to find them, I believe, from Stantec, who had purchased the original engineering company, Walter Dufresne. So they were able to track down the original as-built. And we were convinced that they were the legitimate as-built because of some very interesting notes on them that could only pertain to our neighborhood and our neighbors. So we were convinced. And then Act 250 stated in their decision to issue the land use permit after they found the as-built that while valid points had been made concerning velocity and with the 2 points, Potter Place and Logan Court, that they exceeded the state's recommended norms and criteria. And there was nothing in the as-built that indicated that concrete pillars were constructed or anything that the engineer had said they should do under those circumstances. What, interestingly, Act 250 Commission said was that the standards that were in place at the time that the construction was built, which was around 2000, that those were not the same standards that the engineer had used in their study. So they were, during the construction, they were operating under the 1996 engineering code that the state had. So therefore, they concluded that they could not apply the updated standards, even though it was a new development going in, that they could not apply that to our neighborhood. So we found that was a real head scratcher for me, because it's sort of like, okay, if you have a house that's built in the 1900s and you want to build another story on top, the building codes that were today's building codes would not apply. It would be the codes for 1900, which makes no sense, for something that's brand new. But anyway, that is what they determined. So the good news is the town now has the as-built, which is very good. The bad news is we don't necessarily know if there are going to be problems when they hook up still. So, another engineering study wasn't done. The Andy Rowe, the engineer for Snyder's development company, did look over the as-built and determined that there were no significant differences, so he did not see a problem. But there was no independent study done. So then the last thing that was determined with the Act 250 study was that they reported in their findings of fact that the town of Shelburne DRB approved the project, including the proposal for rerouting the wastewater to wastewater treatment 1 on April 17th, 2019. Now, Bill went to the Act 250 hearing on April 9th, 2019. So it was, after that the project was even approved. So that had not been done before the Act 250 proceeding started. So I did want to bring that to your attention. It was 8 days after the meeting. It was 7 days after I emailed you and Mary saying that we can't find any record anywhere that the sewer system was rerouted and that it was approved. And now we know why, because it wasn't there. Bill even asked, I think the first meeting on May 28th, Dean Pierce directly, when was this approved, because he could not find it in the minutes, and we did not get an answer. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. It's, the bottom line, what happened was on September 6th, when we got our final the report back from Act 250 Commission, they basically said the time to appeal the DRB's decision has lapsed. So all this time that the administration knew, we never would have thought to look from the moment the Act 250 hearing happened forward. You would assume that all of that had been done beforehand. So, but anyway, they said it had lapsed, and the only thing we could do was take it to the Vermont Superior Court. And we had a 15-day limit to do that. So, and the reason I'm saying this is I've been in your shoes. I know the Select Board's role is to oversee the administration, to make sure that they're doing the business of the town, that they are operating in a transparent manner, and so on. And I just felt that you should know this, that there was a terrible mistake that happened. And it seemed that there was a purposeful cover-up, because during all the meetings that we were going over this, never was it mentioned, when we asked directly. So that's just,
No, what was not mentioned?
It wasn't mentioned that there was all this question about the timing of when these meetings happened and why weren't we notified. And even after we had brought it to the attention, I know we talked to you guys and that we copied Lee and said, look, we just really need to know, and that we should be told as a neighborhood. Still, it was, we weren't notified that they were doing this on April 17th. We're direct abutting neighbors. We never received a notification.
This was the DRB.
The DRB meeting, yeah. So when they finally did it on April 17th. So,
when you say it, sorry, Tony, you mean the DRB's approval of the sewer connection
itself? The sewer reroute.
Okay.
Is
And you were not
Yeah.
notified of that meeting.
Right, right, right. So, you know, and I mean, I know you guys. I know that you want to do the best for the town, and that. So I don't know if this was just an oversight, if someone just didn't want to fess up what happened, but I just thought you should know.
Well, we'll find out.
Thank you. I trust that you will. As far as restitution, in our petition, we talked about just restitution, and maybe restitution wasn't the best word. I, have since understood that it is sort of a legal term. Compensation's got its own legal meanings too. But the gist of what we were trying to say is just that we wanted what was ethically right in the spirit of fairness, that we had, in good faith, we actually had cooperated with the town after first fighting the town, ourselves and other members, and there was maybe a third of the households had systems that were failing or on the verge of failing. The rest of us were fine. And, so when the town first put it on the ballot and said that they thought that Shelburne Heights needed to have the sewer system to be hooked up, we fought it vigorously. We, wrote letters. We took out an ad in the Shelburne News, and we were able to defeat it the first time. So the town came back to us the second go around and, was talking, what do we need to do? Because they did want to solve the problem of some of our neighbors. And they also wanted more users for the sewer. The feeling was the more users we have, the more, they've got the capacity, it'll bring down the cost for everybody. So it really was in the town's best interest. We didn't so much agree to it, we more or less agreed not to fight it going forward. But it was, the mandate was that everybody has to sign up, whether it benefits you or not. Once they decide to put the sewer, and they put it to a town vote. So it really, anyway, Jerry, you had asked what we meant by restitution, what we felt we had lost or what had been taken from us. And really what, I guess, if there was anything that was taken from us, it was we lost our septic systems. We had to pay, in our case, it was about $5,000 to hook up, getting the excavator and all of that. And then, of course, there's the sewer fees and then the special assessment on top of that. So there was definitely a cost to it. It was not in our best interest to do it. Even for the environment, it's not in our best interest. I mean, we had a lot of the neighborhood had a perfectly functioning system. So that, I'm not sure. The one thing I want to say is we are not, we're not suing the town. This is an illegal thing. We just really would ask for fairness from the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Would anyone else like to add? Tarn?
Hi. Tarn Ferg, 172 Morse. So I'm just conscious of your time, and I saw your agenda. Wow. So I am grateful to live in a multi-generational neighborhood and where the history of the town comes forth when we have potlucks and I get a chance to sit in people's living rooms. So, and part of that has been listening to people's story of their experience and the impact. And, this is only one piece of it. They're belonging to Shelburne and everything else. But one thing that's kind of lingering. And I would agree with the language, the legal language around restitution, that in fact, the legal definition of restitution wouldn't be met in this case. And I think Jerry, you and I have exchanged an email around that. However, 80% of the cost of this build, which the neighbors at the time felt in good faith was something they needed to do for themselves because the town said no as a vote, 80% has been paid. And now the benefit of that is Shelburne gets to grow. You get to have more residents move in. That benefits the town financially in numerous ways across systems. And the owners of the neighborhood, well before Flo and I moved in, paid actually into the system years before many of them could even hook up. So they were waiting. They were, doing the extra builds and the connection. So they were paying in advance of even being able to use that. And I guess I'm, in thinking about that, I personally, I think in our household, we build towards the greater good, and that's a good thing. And we also think about some equity and fairness. And so 80% of this has been built. We know a big revenue source is coming in with the development that will be part of our community. And we ask respectfully that you consider the request to cease the current liens on this development or on our community, our neighborhood, and that you, even as of really thinking about as of 2017, when a team of folks got together and in their best judgment said that the best thing to do would be to reroute instead of Webster going through Shelburne Heights. And I'm not here to debate that at all right now. I guess when in 2017 that happened, ideally that would have been the time to say, you know what, that's not on this neighborhood to pay this anymore because this is public domain and we are going to use this for the greater good to build our community. And so I think the thing to do would have been in 2017 to cease charging us this extra money. However, here we are today. So I would ask you at the bare minimum to consider, as of now, stopping those charges, knowing that the money will be paid. We're not in a, I've seen the budget for the sewer and water system because that was discussed after the last meeting where we were here talking about things. So I know that it does not create a current hardship on another system. As I said, I'm thinking about greater good. And I really think it would go a long way with the residents in the community to think about what's equitable. And it's built, it's going to be used. It's going to be used by even, more than double. And I think that's the right thing to do. So.
Thank you, Taryn.
Questions for me? Or?
It might help some of you to understand. Both Taryn and Tony have referred to some exchanges that I've had with them in an effort to better understand what the thinking is in requesting restitution. And in those exchanges, I noted that ordinarily restitution implies loss or theft, that in this case there may well be the loss of exclusivity, which was an issue from the very beginning and underlies a good deal of the conversations we've had since. On the other hand, there was a provision of service, and so if you try to work your way through the question based on loss or theft, it's a little difficult and finally gets to be abstract enough, as I think I said, to humble the effort. This is a problem of some magnitude because we're talking about in excess of $500,000 worth of assessments. So we're not, we have a question of major scale here everywhere you look. Not only would restitution be on that order, and if there were interest requested, which might not be abnormal, you might be looking at something close to $1 million over a 19-year period. On the other hand, there are questions of scale as well in terms of what is the equity of a group of residents calling themselves a neighborhood or not, in terms of a town service designed and built and operated to serve everybody in the town. So in some ways, this idea has a very strong appeal in its simplicity, and its what seems to be its simplicity. In some other ways, this is a pretty tough nut to deal with in terms of where do you begin. And I'm not sure, absent one member tonight, what our next steps will be. Do you have you want to comment?
Where did you get the number of the 500,000 when they say the 80%?
The number
has
of
been paid?
people who have brought 560,000 is what has been assessed
Which
and
is
paid
almost
to date.
80% of the whole build.
That has been paid.
Has
Yeah.
been paid. Sorry.
And the 150-odd thousand remains.
51,000 left. And
Yeah.
if you consider the impact fee, which will be is required of any new developer building for houses,
Yeah.
that money would be more than
Then you,
replaced
yeah.
by the new build.
So they've paid in
Right.
that much now. They have 151 left, and those are figures that Peter helped us with.
Okay. I was just wondering where they came from. Okay.
Thoughts, Colleen?
You know, this would, I think, would have been useful, I think, for Lee to have been here, because there was like this other side of it, that there's that anybody hooking in would be paying, and I don't know exactly how to differentiate. It seems like that the new system tying into this should be picking up some more of the bill. That seems to kind of inherently make sense to me, but I don't know exactly how the math shakes out for it. You know, and where it's nice to say, well, we had a perfectly working sewer system, and I'm just playing devil's advocate, that we had a perfectly working, you know, our own mound system or whatever system you had. We know those fail. And I mean, like, we've had ours for 26 years, and we've had to put money into it. And God, I would love to have been on town sewer. So it's not as if the money paid means that you paid it and you wouldn't have had to pay anything for the last however many years. So I think there's manipulations, I think, of where this number might come down to. I don't think it's necessarily, in my opinion, I don't think it's out of the realm of fairness that some compensation should be made. I just don't know what that number is. And I feel like it deserves a little bit more conversation.
Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, my sense is this is all shared infrastructure. I'm sympathetic to just the personal nature of this for some of you who have lived in that neighborhood for decades and decades and gone through the ballot measures and gone through all the emotions of, you know, systems failing and then a neighborhood that's sort of divided in a lot of ways, because yes, you're one neighborhood tonight, but at the time you very much were on different sides of this when you had systems failing with your neighbor versus folks who were very happy with their current systems. So as far as just the cost go, I mean, I'm struggling a bit with saying that a new development should pay more just because they can pay more, or that's the piece that I don't quite, I'm not convinced of that yet, so I'm still thinking about it. Beyond that, I would just say the other piece of this that I think is very different from someone like me that bought a house on sewer and paid for it not one time, paying a mortgage, but you're paying an installment, so it's just you're feeling this much more than you would at one point in time. So that's the piece for me that I get it. It's different than what what someone else might pay at one point in time on a one-off transaction, but that's the nature of the installment program that you are benefiting from in some ways, because you're going to recoup that with your fair market value if and when you sell it. please.
So I guess my comment is Flo and I moved from a septic system ourselves, and we felt the hurt of having to replace that ourselves in our system. However, it was ours, so we appreciate I appreciate the fair market value of that and those kinds of things. On the other hand, you earlier commented about it's a public good, it's a public service, but remember that you went to the town at the time, not you. The town went, had a vote on it, and the rest of the town said, no, we don't want to pay for it. So now we're in a different mindset, socially, ecologically, where we share these systems more readily. However, at the time, the town vote was no, and so those two things for me are just a little bit points of difference over time that have changed. And also when you own your system, it is your system, and you do have to pay over time, or you miraculously have a huge chunk of money to bury a Porsche in your yard to replace it, but
yes,
in terms of cost was
agreed.
what I mean.
You would own the mound system.
You would own it, and you would be the one taking care and caution with it. So there is some difference there. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to think about it more generally, the ballot measure itself, whether the whole town voted it down versus the neighborhood itself approving it.
There are a number of questions. One of the basic questions is that if we did decide to restitute, or even in our own vernacular, right? The question is how, and that might be a town vote itself next March. I think my sense of it tonight is that Lee is not here. He's a principal actor in all this. We have one member absent, and Mike, of course, recuses. If my colleagues agree, I think we could commit to one more meeting, and that we come back to that meeting with some sense of what we may be willing to do, if anything, so that you have something hard against to push or cheer. I'm not sure what the benefit is of extensive discussion of this. I think this is a problem you could see from any of 15 directions and come out with 30 conclusions, and there are very practical considerations here, not the least of which is how to pay for it. And there are large questions of precedent, very large questions of the use of service and the value of that over time. Large questions of whether you could insist on some contribution from a developer who at this point is likely beyond our reach, and such. But I promise you we'll devote some time to it and try to organize a response that the board can individually weigh in on at the time, and discuss that with you at another meeting with an idea toward coming to some conclusion at that point.
Could we consider, so we're going to have to make
I'm so
another
sorry.
payment.
Yeah.
Oh,
Do you mind just give somebody else a chance, and then you can...
This is Noah Dater. Thank you. I know there's a question of this, but I think the town is in a fairly tricky place where if you look at the Act 250 town cost analysis, which was submitted, there are a couple of key statements in there that I think, are significant. One, it's the town that said this project will not encumber the wastewater system's present users. And when I think about our neighborhood being encumbered, AK paying more than everybody else in the town to have an additional, users going through it, I think that meets that sort of that term or that qualification around encumberment. And then the town also certified that wastewater used will be paid at the same rate as other residential users. And I was looking into what is a rate as far as a bill, because we all get a bill from the town for our sewer, and it's $100 a quarter more or whatever it is than everybody else that pays within the town. And I was kind of looking, of course, we're not, the PUC doesn't apply, the Public Utility Commission doesn't apply here, but for other utilities, what does the rate constitute in the sort of legal meaning? And it's my understanding that very much that's the total, not just the, a few line items on a bill. So when I look at that, I sort of see some real questions around what the town certified to the Act 250 and what the reality is for the residents within this neighborhood that are paying for somebody else to connect to it. So,
But how does that apply to the question of restitution?
well, I think that's something
Are you
that the town needs to.
identifying a continuing inequity? Is that what you're saying?
I'm identifying that I think, yes, there's continued inequity, that our neighborhood in particular, because we're paying for this assessment, would be encumbered, more than other other people that are
Financially, you're
using
saying.
financially
All right.
that are using the same system or connecting to that very same system. So I think that's a quandary, and that if what it was true and what was submitted is there, then the town needs to come up with some ways to make this.
But wouldn't we want to be careful to note that you're paying on an installment basis? That you're paying an amount that was not collected at the start 20 years ago, but is being paid out over a period of time. That to me seems a little different in terms of how you are describing payment at this point. I mean, you're finishing up an obligation that was taken, correct?
That is true. I
Right.
mean, I think there are a few ways to look at that depending on.
I don't disagree.
is-
I think the question of inequity. I think the question of equity is maybe the most workable one in front of us.
And
Yeah.
then I think the question of installment is what constitute a rate. We're still paying for this throughout time. When Green Mountain Power installs a new substation, they come back and they increase your rate, and you pay for that substation over many years of usage. So, within these things, it seems like there's somewhat of a precedent for sort of common goods and what the rate is that we pay. And in this case, we said the rate, is equal to everybody else. And I would say that the folks in this room are paying a higher nominal rate than the other users that would be connecting
the interesting
to
thing
this
is they get a rate
system.
of return based on their capital use, and that's not what the town's doing here.
I understand that.
So if the town were doing that, the actual rate might be considerably considerably greater.
Yeah.
But anyway, we thank you for your
All right, thank you.
input. We have one more comment, and then we're going to. Okay.
We all appreciate the complexity of the issue.
Yeah.
And appreciate the time you're devoting to it.
Yeah.
I'm Roland Limoges, live in Shelburne Heights. This might be able to help you out a little bit. This comes from a 1999 board meeting
Yes.
in relation to this topic. That's how long it's been going on. May I read it?
Yeah, we've all seen it.
Oh, you
to be
have seen
honest.
it?
Yes. It's in 1999 notes. You have the lodestone here because there doesn't appear to be any other record of what happened or was discussed. Those notes, the import of those notes is that you as a neighborhood were assured that this was an exclusive system. It would seem to me that you are more relaxed paying for something that's exclusively yours than you might be now to learn that it's not.
Mm-hmm. But developers are supposed to also piggyback on the cost of this. Any new developer is supposed to piggyback on the cost of this, which is beneficial for the town.
Yes. Roland, I appreciate your input. Believe me, it's right in here.
Thank you, sir.
I went to the trouble of putting 3 holes in it so I don't lose it.
Thank you, sir.
But we appreciate your
people.
input. I think on the basis, unless my colleagues aren't agreed that we put this on a next meeting agenda, we'll devote some time to some of these questions, some of which we couldn't have anticipated, and I thank you for coming and raising them. The fourth item, we're going to move on. The fourth item in the petition was public notice, you'll remember. I frankly had sort of anticipated we'd subsume that in some of the discussion to this point. One new learning tonight is that maybe not, and in which case we may return to the fourth item in the petition, D, as well. But we thank you for coming. We'll prepare the best response we can for you. It may be to agree with you. It may be not to agree with you. It may be we try to find some common ground. In any case, thanks for coming, and we'll see you next meeting. The next item is to discuss the town beaver control protocol, which has been provided you. Lee has made available to us a marked up copy to indicate changes that were made from the last time we reviewed this. In what he identifies as an October 15, 2019 draft. I think the changes, several of them are pretty minor. In writing this, at one point, I just neglected to add the Green Mountain Animal Defenders and Beaver Deceasers to the list of those who are technical and experiential resources. This basically says that in the case of, thank you, Mike.
Am I good to come back in?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. God, we forgot all about you.
That's all right. Feel free.
Oh, jeez. It basically says that the town manager will make use of, consultant use of a variety of resources in reaching any conclusion that there's a threat. And in the particular case of utilizing lethal options, that decision will be made with the prior approval of the select board and according to a variety of standards.
So I'm generally okay with the edits. I think I said this last time, I question how much the board should be involved with approving this and whether it's feasible, but
Timing wise.
I defer to Lee and the chair to make that determination whether it's practical or not for the whole board to approve this. I know we have the sort of safety in here if
We
in
put
case of an
outlet
emergency
in-
the chair can be notified.
Yeah, and we simply would have to provide for that escape hatch.
Yeah,
because,
that's fine.
We couldn't wait.
Yep.
Yeah.
And can't imagine there will be too many of these that come up.
Oh, I think
But
there will
I have
be.
no idea.
I was like, I said the exact opposite.
When
I
I
think,
say
yeah,
that,
it was like I think there's gonna be plenty of times.
What I don't want to see is for this to become something that a special meeting needs to be warned for, and then the board
And then
needs
there's,
No, I
to
think-
assemble
and then
and
we
it
have to
comes
have
the
another
that would
meeting.
sort of defeat the purpose.
Yeah.
I think the question of approval is indicative of the seriousness with which the town in this protocol takes exercise of the lethal option.
I think I would just rather have it be.
town manager.
Yeah, I would rather have it be approved by the town manager with notification to the
Yes.
select board. So we're all held accountable if we're allowing this to just go on unheeded without trying to solve it. But at the same time, I feel like this is just overstepping our.
That's kind of how I feel about it too. I just
Okay.
would put my trust in the town manager, and if he or she is making bad decisions about this, then the select board's aware of it. And
So you're just questioning the need for pre-approval?
Right. If we've already, I think, we have basically a policy, and that This is a
I
big
just-
change.
I just don't think this board should be in the business of administering this
Right.
policy, is
Would-
kind of how I feel
Would you
about it.
accept prior notice to the select board?
Yes. Notice is great.
I think
Awareness
notice.
is a good thing for
Yeah.
this board all around, but as far as just inserting the board in decision making, don't love it.
I agree.
Mike?
Well,
my opinion.
so the question is prior notification, but not approval?
No, I would vest all
Post-notification?
authority in the town manager as long as the board's made aware of.
Yeah. I
Okay.
would say
that
notice to
decision
the
is.
select board.
Yeah.
So, trapping shall be conducted by notice? I mean, what are we looking
By
for?
the-
No, if
If trapping has
if
been
they've
conducted,
exhausted all non-lethal options and the decision has been made that they have to proceed with trapping, I feel comfortable if that decision was made and then we were notified.
Right, it would be
In which case, it
pre-approval
would
of the
be
town
prior
manager.
notice to the select board.
Just, yeah.
Before-
but no, they're not talking prior
No.
notice.
I'm not, because if
So,
they're,
so
if-
it's not
You're
prior
talking about
notice.
after the fact notice?
Or
Right,
just
or at
notice,
some
without
point.
really saying whether it needs to be prior to the event happening, there just needs to be notice in the process.
right,
So if there were an emergency situation, that's covered. I mean, I think we agree that notification and the manager would be in the situation of having to make that call. But the question is whether the shall is necessary. Shall be pre-approved.
Okay. The consensus would be to, what language would you like to substitute there, if any?
trapping shall be conducted by pre-approval by the town manager. And then another asterisk will be, and notification shall be, given
Yeah.
to the select board within, I don't even know, you can
Yeah.
even put a time period on there.
Pre-approval of the town manager with prompt written notice to follow to the select board.
Within 3 days,
Within 3
something
days,
within
as soon as
48 hours, as soon as possible.
reasonably practicable, something like that, right? Like,
Like, I wouldn't want to know, like, 2 months later, oh yeah, we trapped a few beavers, sorry we didn't
All
tell
right, so
you.
we could leave it, the town must employ trapping as population control, so that covers, I don't see, at this point, a need for anything there, except to have a statement that describes,
here.
notice.
yeah, also fine with that,
Yeah.
right? Like, trapping shall be conducted by a licensed trapper, right? Just turn that into a sentence, or,
And I'd like us to at least say prior notice, given that we have an escape hatch for any kind of an emergency situation. In other words, that the select board's made aware that there will or may be.
So it's not
trapping.
pre-approval, but it's prior notice.
Prior notice. That acceptable? We substitute prior notice for
so
pre-approval?
it's notice to the board before a decision is made to trap? Or that a beaver has been trapped?
I just think that
Well, I think-
if they
I think
come to us and they've already exhausted everything and they know that this needs to be done, at that point,
I think the
what-
town manager should be responsible to
Yeah.
let the board know that we're going to be trapping.
So before trapping is conducted, you're saying? To
No.
inform the,
I just feel like
You're-
if we do that, it's like this implication that there can be an action taken that's going to avoid that inevitability.
Well, maybe it's a matter of changing a shall to a should. I mean, your concern is that it makes it sound like they can only be trapped if it's approved,
Right,
and you don't think the select board ought to be in a position of approving those
right.
decisions.
yeah, I tend to
We're
agree.
policy
I just
making,
don't,
not
it sort of
administering.
suggests there's a veto right, right? If someone puts
Yeah.
their hand up and says, hey, actually don't do this.
And then
That's
what
not
happens?
a good idea.
Yeah.
Right. Then
And
we're
then
in
it
a
becomes
we're
a
in an
board
awkward
discussion,
situation.
Right? It just seems like it's going in
Okay,
circles.
Jamie, you want to repeat the language that we're circling
Town
around?
manager,
Well,
trapping.
I'm suggesting that
What do you
saying
think,
something like the trapping should, if trapping is to occur, it should or no, I don't even think we need that.
The
Maybe-
rest of them have got to be shall. I don't know how we,
Well, the shall makes it sound like it
Yeah.
has to be approved by an action of the select board.
yeah, but I mean, in terms of a licensed trapper.
That I
and-
understand.
And
Yeah, that's all
accordance
fine.
with, that should be shall.
That should be
that's
shall.
fine.
Right.
What you're
I don't have
The
a
question
No
is
objection to
what
that.
role does notification of the select board play?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't,
So-
yeah, we're a policy-making board, not administration of that
Right.
policy.
Okay, so we would take out pre-approval of the select board first.
Yeah.
Yep.
I would
The
just
select-
take that out.
The
Have a
select board
sentence.
shall be notified of any trapping as soon as
Intend or plan
reasonably.
to trap,
Yes.
Yeah.
Of any.
Not intent to trap, just.
Well, you want the notification prior to the action, is what you're asking for, Jerry.
well, that language is, shall be notified of any intention or plan to trap.
See, and that's what I disagree with.
Oh,
Colleen thinks that makes it sound like the decision is contingent on our approval.
gee,
Right.
I
If
don't know.
prior
mean,
to
me,
the
just
trapping, we have to
notices-
be notified. And I think that the decision-making should be the town manager, if it's going to happen, and telling us, when we have this policy that we know we've already exhausted this, at that point, we shouldn't be disagreeing with that. And then if we shouldn't be disagreeing with that, then having this, this action that we have to be notified implies that we have to react.
Okay,
Yeah, I think I'm fine with that. I think I'm fine with the idea that we have to be notified, and it seems right that if the notification results in us disagreeing with the decision, then we have recourse to revisit the issue or
Okay.
have some kind of discussion.
you got language to that?
So
Did we agree
this-
on that, or I?
think so.
Select board.
got
if
confused.
if the language is the select board shall be notified
The select board shall be notified if any trapping occurs.
if any
period.
trapping
Okay,
occurs,
if any trapping
right?
occurs. Okay.
Then if the policy functions, no trapping should be needed unless there was some emergency situation or something.
It is a
came
little
up.
redundant, and there's no,
That's fine. I mean, if the idea is that we want this to be at least, above, everything is public, and, if the idea is just to have an ability to review, I think that's fine.
Yeah, and then you have to really just tweak this sentence.
Yeah, we have to do a
In the
little.
case of an emergency for which, I think you just delete that whole,
which,
in the case of an emergency.
we would just,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you
we
just
would just
X that
exit
whole
out.
Yeah.
sentence.
Okay?
Otherwise, I'm good with it.
Now we have some interested folks here. We're not going to be terribly thrilled, I know, about, you want to comment, Sharon, Lisa, or Jim?
Jim White, Hillside Terrace, thanks for listening. I've been part of the resident group that worked on this. And just to give you some background, we wanted to make sure that there were checks and balances in place because basically lethal solutions to the issue of beavers have been so ingrained in our culture that it's very easy to fall back to that position. We wanted to make sure that everything was put in place that could at least call into question whether a lethal solution was necessary. And I think part of the thinking behind getting the select board notified is that if the select board knew, then the public would know. And we're not sure that the public would find out until too late otherwise. So that was part of our thinking. We're working against this heritage of killing the beavers if you have a beaver in the neighborhood. And we're trying to make it as transparent a process as possible as a checks and balances kind of system.
So the reality, Jim, I'm guessing, is that in this scenario, we would get an email, whoever's sitting on this board at that point in time would get an email from the town manager. We plan to trap, need a response within 24 hours, right? 48 hours? What's the typical time? I just question whether notice would actually
Well, and this
make its way to the public.
and
I
this
get
is the
it, but
problem. In addition, sorry, I don't want to.
no, it's fine.
This is the other issue. So if something like this that there's a beaver that has started to cause issues, and they've tried, or for whatever reason what they would normally like to use isn't going to work in this situation, and then they notify us, and we can't make a decision like that.
Sure.
We then have to do public notice and we have to schedule a meeting, and there has to be at least 3 days,
Right.
and then we have a big discussion, and then action has to be taken. So you could be like a week to 2 weeks out from making a decision about something,
Right.
where maybe it didn't rise to being emergent, and so it didn't rise to that yet. But we already started the ball rolling, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait, you know what? This is actually starting to become emergent, and then it happens, and then guess what? Then the public comes back and says, hey, we were going to come and talk to you guys about this on this meeting, and then you went and shot the beaver, or however they do it.
Sure.
And so there's consequences of this, but I get what you're saying, and I completely understand. And just so you understand, I'm also on your side. I want them to use every other means possible.
Right.
But I think that the workability of this doesn't work in this situation. It's not the way this board is supposed to function.
Yes, I hear.
But the fact that we're able to be notified, so then we can make changes like putting in yes, that. So we can make that decision. What?
It also creates the transparency.
The
If there's
notification.
a requirement to notify, it creates transparency. So if any of the policy wasn't followed, or if there wasn't some consensus that all the means were tried, at least the public knows, we know, the board knows, maybe not us.
But notification is fine, but the idea of pre-approval, I'm just
Pre-approval,
against.
I understand
Okay.
that your argument is that it's unworkable, sort of from a practical point of view. And I tend to agree, it's not our role to be given veto powers over town manager decisions, or at least to intervene in those. But I also think we have to find a way to keep it transparent, and to shift the attitude towards the management away from the acceptability of lethal options.
Right. And we may be talking about rare and exceptional cases. Hopefully we are, in terms of finding a lethal solution. And it may be that as long as there's enough awareness built into the process, if we get to the point where a lethal solution was used and a lot of people are thinking there wasn't the need for that, then we have a follow-up conversation to see what went wrong, what we should put into place to prevent that from happening again.
I mean, I'd be happy to address that concern if notice to Green Mountain Animal Defenders would be helpful, just so you have awareness of that. In addition to the select board, we'd be notified, but I don't have any objections to more people being made aware of the fact that there was a trapping, if they're interested in knowing.
I think that would be good, and I was going to suggest that, while the select board is being notified, maybe the public could be notified through the newspaper or whatever means you use, just to get the word out as much as possible.
That's what this protocol says.
Yeah.
It says in the last bullet, notice to maximize public awareness and ensure public safety.
Yeah.
So it was anticipated that there would be a need for public notice, which cannot always be efficiently done with a board meeting for the same reasons that Colleen has indicated. We only are biweekly.
Sure.
And furthermore, we were concerned to include a provision for people who might happen in the midst of the event, and neighboring landowners and whatnot, to make them aware something's going on.
Right.
So, in my sense, that notice is a requirement, and it can only be public. And furthermore, we've said it should maximize public awareness and ensure public safety. So it's conditioned on more than just printing something somewhere. I think the issue, Jim, comes down to points that Colleen and Jamie and Mike have all been making, which is the roles and responsibilities of board and town manager.
Right, I hear that.
And
yes.
Very likely we're disposed to be to think of a much more healthy relationship between the town manager and us in terms of we have great confidence. I think there is a danger of overkill here, and I don't mean to use that in a bad pun, you know. But for me, I don't think we're going to lose too much if we simply make the select board involvement a matter of notification. Because the critical notification is of the public and those who are nearest to the site, and that's a requirement, plain and simple here.
Yes.
So the town manager would have to have performed that, and in a sense, we're a little less important than the public.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
A lot less important.
Yeah.
They could put that like in the town manager report.
Sure.
I mean, like then it's public, it's in the minute
Sure.
meetings, and the select board is publicly made aware of it.
Yeah. Can we agree on general language here so that we can move
Yep.
on this
Yeah,
rather than come
I
back?
think
Can
so.
we just
Good.
make one other note, a small note? Under lethal option, it lists trapping only, and actually there may be other ways to perform a lethal removal of the beavers that are preferable, such as shooting them, which is less torturous than trapping. So we just wanted to allow for other possibilities besides trapping as a lethal solution.
Okay, well then that answers my question to Jamie.
All right. So what we would
Trapping
we would
slash-
drop
Yeah.
trapping out of there.
Beaver shall be by the most humane means available.
Yeah, the most humane means or the least.
It's here.
Yeah,
It's
that's
already
right there.
here. Killing a beaver shall be made by the most humane means available, consistent with the AMBA guidelines for euthanasia.
Great, yeah, so
That's-
that people aren't pushed in the direction of trapping necessarily.
Yep.
Okay.
So
Oh, I
let's
see.
just
Why does
delete
it say-
trapping.
We just take trapping out.
Lethal option, right?
Well, why don't we just move this sentence first? Because I think the fact that it says trapping makes it sound like that's.
Yeah, right.
Because this is just referring to the fact that trapping shall be conducted by a licensed
Yeah, I agree.
trapper, and
Oh, okay.
I think that that's the problem. Is it makes it sound like it's all
It
under
does.
trapping.
Right.
All right. So
The
you'd enter
baseline principle
that
is
killing of beaver shall be, and then you'd retain the trapping shall be conducted by.
Yeah,
Okay.
a
Yeah.
licensed those 4 bullets.
Right.
And
Right.
then,
If
well, and
trapping
really
is-
the 5th
And meanwhile,
bullet
we
is,
take out
yeah.
trapping from lethal option.
From the header.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just want to say that
Yeah,
this
that's
is a very
cleaner.
exciting policy, in my opinion, and I really appreciate the fact that you're grappling with it.
Thank
Yeah.
you all for
It's
you,
a
sir.
Definite
involvement.
improvement.
Hey, the biggest, the most stupendous event is that with Sharon's help, as we all know, Paul Goodrich is going to meet on site in Turtle Lane Friday with a beaver control expert, and Sharon, and I'm sure Jim and others in attendance, and Lisa if she wishes, and I think that's just a fantastic
Great.
step. It's just exactly what we might have wished
Yeah, the lines of communication are
when we
open.
started.
And
Yeah, so
that's a great.
thank you. Yeah, by all means,
Sure.
a few seconds.
Okay, yeah, I'll be really quick. Well, Jim sort of stole my thunder because I was going to say the same thing about the trapping. To his point, it's people think beaver and then they immediately jump to trapping, you know, and so I was going to say the same thing. There was other methods that were not included, so I appreciate your willingness to tweak that out because that I think that's a lot better. When Jim was up, we were talking, there was some discussion about notification to the select board and then notification to Green Mountain Animal Defenders. But I would like to suggest that that the notification go to 2 of the technical resources that are mentioned in the document. That way, if one organization, for whatever reason, can't step up in the moment, then there would be a second one. So possibly you could say Green Mountain Animal Defenders and one other, but I think any 2 on the list
Yeah.
would be preferable to just having 1.
Here's how I came out on that, Sharon. I would think that the town manager would automatically do that. if somebody's not in or answering, you would simply go on to the next one.
Right.
And to require two under circumstances might be a little burdensome.
I mean, to me, it's just a copying on the same email. But if you, you know, it's just a suggestion on my part, because I know sometimes a lot of the groups are, you know, nonprofit, volunteer run, and, you know, like you say, you would, if they reach out, if the town manager reaches out, do they wait 24 hours, 36 hours? You know, how many, you know, so I mean, it would just seem like it would be a built-in safety net to have two or more, but I'm just putting it out there.
It circumscribes the town manager's behavior to a degree that maybe we're not
Okay.
going to be comfortable with. so
Okay. Well,
I
thank
get
you.
your
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. And thank you, everyone, for, I know a lot of time and effort and consideration went into this, so thank you.
Do you want to review the changes that?
Did you pick those up, Peter? Do you need?
Well, I guess it comes down to the lethal option in terms of the town manager.
Trapping comes out of it.
Right.
I can give you
We
this
start
one.
off with
You want mine?
with the sentence that's last in that
You got
section,
that.
killing
Sounds
of, and make that first.
So move that.
We drop the pre-approval of the select board, and Jamie has a sentence of language in terms of notification. We don't have to say after the fact, but notice, you know,
Prompt.
you know,
And conducted by the most humane means available. Is
Yeah,
that-
that'll be
That just
right
moves
underneath
up.
here.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
And
put
then
that
this
first.
is,
The select board shall be notified if any trapping occurs. Shall be promptly notified.
Shall be notified.
If any trapping.
We appreciate
Well-
everybody's patience, but we'd like to finish this tonight.
Non-lethal,
If any lethal.
yeah, lethal method was used, is used. Lethal method is utilized.
Yeah, whatever.
Some word. Okay.
And the only question about what notification would be required, is that,
I mean, do you want to say written or do you want to say included in the town manager report? I feel like that's the most public.
I'd leave that
Would leave
pretty
it up to the,
general.
yeah, I
That's-
agree. I would leave it up to
yeah,
the town
leave it up to
manager.
the town
to-
manager to
notify
Determine
the select
the
board
mode of
and
communication, yeah.
public? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, we already have public
Yeah,
in the
that's
back
in
here.
there.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Okay.
okay, will someone
Mm-hmm. Good
move
to go.
adoption
Okay.
I'll move
Right.
to
as changed?
adopt the
As-
amended
Yeah,
Beaver policy.
moved by Mike,
Second.
seconded by Jamie. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those disapproving, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, now we're on a fast track. Next item, Bay Road Railroad Underpass, Colleen,
Yeah,
expressed-
and to be honest, there was somebody that I really wanted to have be here that couldn't be here, and I should have brought this up at when we were approved the agenda. I wouldn't mind just saying just a brief sentence, but then if we could just reassess this at either the next meeting or the meeting after that. I think actually the next meeting he
Wanna
also
do
wasn't
that?
able to
Just-
be here, but the meeting after he can. But I do think that we need to start exploring some other options, and this has been kind of consistent and constant, and we've dealt with this. I mean, before you were on the board, probably, and we can't come up with a great solution, and I feel like it needs a little bit more commitment. And there were some suggestions given to me about ways to go about this, but I'd really like that person to be here. I think that he can do a better job explaining it than me. And but yeah, I think that the idea that the people who live in the town, we know how that bridge works, but Shelburne Farms is, what is it, number 2 in the state for tourist attractions, and so you get a lot of out-of-staters and out-of-countryers, and they don't know how it works, and so those situations can be really scary.
So you're thinking in terms of managing traffic through the.
Yeah, in a safer manner.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll put that on the next meeting agenda, all right? The next item is 12, which we've also rescheduled for the next meeting. And the following item is 13, the Economic Development Forum.
Yeah, so we've had some good publicity on this. There have been a couple Shelburne news articles, and the forum itself is on VCAM, so hopefully everybody out there had a chance to watch it. It was really, really well received. You know, Mike and I were very proud of the time we spent and just the input we received after the panel itself. Couple takeaways, just in my opinion, coming out of it. You know, I don't want to belabor this because of the hour, and we'll dig back into this in future meetings, no doubt, but just a couple points that I wanted to make that I know Mike probably shares some of this and others on the board do as well, but clearly one thing we heard was that we sort of need a bit of a mindset change and attitude adjustment as far as how the community thinks about business generally, as well as including this board and town government. So that message was received loud and clear. This, you know, sort of hunger for more connection and outreach. You know, select board members, we've talked about this, getting out and, you know, formally meeting with businesses, not just going to Kevin's to have a cup of coffee and say that you went and visited a business, like a much more rigorous approach to how we think about outreach. Regulatory reform, we knew that was going to be a big topic, and we spent a lot of time talking about that. No quick solutions will be presented right now, but we definitely have some ideas, and we'll be partnering with Lee and the board, of course, to think about what makes the most sense as far as how we get after some of those ideas and concerns. And then I think lastly, just a general sense that people were very excited to hear us talking about this and want more of it. You know, a continued sort of communication and engagement on a topic like this, I think, goes a long way. So we'll commit to that and recognize we have a lot of work to do, but all in all, really productive event and well received. So Mike, my partner in crime here, who helped me pull this all together and co-host it. So
I was along for the ride. Jamie took off like a whippet at a New Jersey dog track after the whole thing. It was great. So, but really, I followed and tried to be helpful where I could. I jumped on the board on this commission because I'm interested and want to learn. So, for me, it was really a learning experience. And to add to what Jamie said, we need to have more regular kinds of, you know, maybe one more in the spring, maybe a more focused forum. We need to continue to do that kind of outreach and try to make those connections. So the more we talk with people and the more we communicate and get a sense of what's needed, but also to get out of this mindset that economic development and the kind of character we want Shelburne to have are somehow at odds. We need to change the conversation there and get people to see that these are mutually compatible goals.
yeah.
And I will say, and I think it's really, people talked a lot about the need for some sort of economic development officer, economic development position. I think we should do some sort of serious analysis of the feasibility of that in some way, shape, or form. And with a lot of the complaints about regulation or about the zoning difficulties, I think having a staff person who can usher people through the process would really alleviate a lot of those types of concerns and a lot of those difficulties and challenges. So I think we could, you know, we should really think seriously about how we can address some. And I'd like to, you know, how feasible is it to task somebody with the job of economic development or you know, somehow
Yeah, no, I mean,
position?
I would just echo that full-time headcount need is definitely something we heard a lot about. And you know, people, again, all anecdotally, I don't know if anybody's run the numbers on this, but they seem to sort of suggest that the ROI on this is pretty high, and you can get a good pickup very quickly from just having that dedicated person doing the outreach and holding hands and helping businesses step through the regulatory hurdles. So there are a lot of ancillary benefits, I guess, from making that investment and additional headcount. I think as a community, we've probably been a little reluctant to add that box organizationally over the years. And we also talked about the fact that there's just a lot of committee fatigue. So trying to form another economic development committee with just an ad hoc group of folks in town probably isn't going to cut it. It won't really move the needle for what we're trying to do. So more to come on all of this, but yeah, I mean, we were just had an incredible panel, and it was a great sort of kickoff event next door at the library. So really excited about it. Good momentum all around.
Yeah, I think the feedback I heard was universally positive. I mean, if anything, I felt like we left a lot on the table, and we could have sat with any of those panelists for hours.
Oh, easy.
So it was great.
We couldn't be more appreciative of the effort of you two. I mean, I thought it was pretty extraordinary, and we're very, very appreciative. Second, I thought the format succeeded.
Agreed.
In a way that maybe we kind of thought it was, but we didn't know until we did it. Yeah. We managed to make use of most of one meeting without putting ourselves in a position of having to have another special meeting.
Yes.
So I think in that case, Lease to be congratulated as well in terms of scheduling our business so that we could take that kind of time, because again, I think the format was probably uniquely accommodating of that kind of discussion, and allowing, obviously, from reading your summaries, for a good deal of detail as well as a breadth of concern. Now, my sense of it is that this is a ready source of ideas and even budget allocations, and we'll be visiting this and referring to it from this point on.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we have like 3 or 4 concrete actions we could just jump on right now if the board decided to spend the time to do that.
We'll certainly encourage that.
And we made connections with some folks on the panel that I just feel like we can leverage now that we have that point of contact.
I think an idea of another 6-month revisit, given some things we will have done by then, is a really good idea. And again, I think the format would succeed with even something like energy conservation
No doubt.
and other items.
Definitely.
I was able to put together like just rudimentary plan of action, other than just like this idea of thinking about a head person, thinking about somebody.
I think that's a good. I mean, I think it would be really helpful if we could identify 1 or 2 actionable items.
Yeah, that's where I came out of it. Is I don't want to overcomplicate it, because we always have so much on our plates, and if we had 3 or 4,
well, could you two do that?
yes, we will. Yeah, and we sort of mentioned them now. It's the additional head count, it's the outreach to local businesses, it's regulatory reform, which is a big.
And in terms of budget, it's very timely. So again, we're very appreciative, I'm sure, as your colleagues, at the effort.
And I think the format is very conducive to whether it's energy is the next forum that the board decides to put on, or whatever.
Even the venue.
Affordable housing is one.
Yeah, maybe try to link up with some of the form-based code review.
Yeah.
To try to get some real serious input and feedback from the business community. Like, what could we deliver here that would facilitate the use of this?
I'm going to hand the mic over, though, on moderating the next one. Mary can do the next.
Well, again, thank you.
Welcome.
We're agreed that you're both encouraged to put together a priority short list.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was. It was fun.
And we'll go from there. So thank you.
And I just wanted to mention Nini.
Yes.
Nini did a great job too.
Great job taking notes, and had a real-time screen up, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Please, Peter, would you pass that on from us? Okay, the next item is the water system fees, and this is an update from the Water Commission. Lee has provided us a fairly detailed review of this. Is there any discussion?
So the fees increased, right?
correct?
is what I understood. Did anything else?
And he included
Change.
in this revision that double asterisk that we questioned the last time around about that we had done previously. I noticed.
On town projects?
Yeah. So in the rewrite, he's included that as well.
I just, I'm new to this particular language.
I messed
I
up.
didn't understand what, and maybe somebody could just help me to understand. I'm looking for the language. The different funds? So, I'm sorry, I'm looking for the language.
The enterprise fund?
Yeah.
In other words, it's a self-contained system.
I'm sorry.
Peter, have you got?
This is why doing this from a laptop is not always
Yeah,
great.
basically, the accounting rules say we operate the sewer department and the water department as separate entities, separate from the town, although we share services. That each have their own set of books,
Okay.
balance sheet, and all
Okay.
of that. The water commission, I guess by charter, is in charge of the water system. They set the rates, approve projects that would be brought to the board for a bond vote, that sort of thing. And since these fees identified here are part of the building permit, which is administered by the town, I think Lee felt that it was important to have the select board see what water fees there are that will be showing up on building permits, the connection fee basically, and the change on affordable housing, whether there was a discount provided before, and that's being proposed to not take place, to be eliminated.
But all fees collected go right back into the water
Right.
fund.
Yep. The fees that you've got here, the connection fees, those you would see on the water department's balance sheet or
Okay,
revenues.
That's what I was
Right.
trying to understand.
That's right.
Is it, just not to take too much time, we know we're going to have some wastewater fees coming up, but can we collect funds in other ways to set aside to begin to build up
Certainly. Yeah.
but we don't do that?
Well, actually, we do now with the sewer fund because there is a sewer capacity fee that's charged, and that does go into a fund that we're accumulating.
That rolls over and
Yep.
accumulates?
Yep,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay, good, that's good to know.
So would you?
I'm not sure we need to take an action
I think we have
here.
to approve the updated fee schedule.
I think the water commissions, that's where there's sort of a gray area. The water commission has set these fees as part of their function.
Well,
But
why
I
don't we
think-
why don't we
But I think
why
Lee
don't we
wanted
move-
at least to be acknowledged by the select board. If you saw any concerns, we would certainly want to communicate that back to the water commission.
call.
All right, is there a motion to the effect of approving the water system fees as recently established by the Water Commission?
So moved.
Jamie moves.
I'll second.
So
Mike's-
the,
I don't
just
know if
to,
we
just to
approve
frame it
it.
up, we do
Yeah.
because the fee schedule itself is being amended
Yeah.
to incorporate the updated fees. The water fees are part of the overall development fee.
So properly,
Schedule.
we'd be amending,
You'd be amending the entire development
Right.
application fee schedule.
we'll
A
understand
part
the,
of which is the water rates.
we'll understand the motion to
Yeah.
that effect.
And I will second
Mike
that.
does in seconds. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The next item is the CIP, and Peter's going to take us through that. While he gets ready, I was prepared to make one comment, which is to agree with Lee that consolidating it with our budget is a really good
I agree.
idea.
I
Yeah.
felt the same way. I didn't
Yeah,
quite understand why it's not part of the overall
yeah,
Which?
budget process.
CIP?
The CIP.
Yeah.
yeah. I think, you know,
I think you need to see it all together to
Yeah,
sort of
absolutely.
understand where these longer-term
They're so
CapEx
interrelated.
investments are being
yeah,
made.
they're so interrelated.
Yeah.
So maybe we could just communicate that to Peter as our sense. Okay?
As most of you know, this is an annual process we go through to update what we call the capital budget and program as defined in statute, or simply the CIP. And what is it? It's basically a 6-year plan of capital projects. We update it every year. It goes through the current, starts with the current budget year that we're in right now. So those projects that are in that year will take place subject to grant availability. And then a projection of the next 5 years as to what projects we are anticipating, not necessarily going to be able to do, but at least they are anticipating for the next 5 years after that. So a 6-year window, basically. And there's a lot of projects in it. Our first step is to solicit department heads and see what they have for projects that they see in their departments, and then bring that to the board, and then try to prioritize, make changes, and go from there. Again, I just want to emphasize, just because it's in the capital budget and program, other than the first year of it, which is part of our operating budget or has been approved, the other years are projections. Some of those projects have been in capital plans for several years and have never taken place. Some projects are in and then taken out. So again, adopting the plan does not mean you're committed to doing the projects that we've got listed in the plan. The purpose of the plan is basically to provide a long-term view. What are we seeing for projects coming up? And then develop a plan for prioritizing which we think are the highest priority, which ones do we want to get to first based on needs and based on other factors. And also look at a broad brush in terms of what else is happening. Like we just said, we've got 3 funds: the general fund, water fund, and sewer fund. There are capital projects in all of those. We don't want to set up the plan so that a lot of them are being done all in the same year, which would result in significant rate increases for both the user fees on water, sewer, and taxes. So again, try to take a big picture and phase them so that we don't have large fluctuations in rates. The third reason, we do have impact fees currently in place for an education impact fee for the CVU expansion, and also an impact fee for recreation facilities. Those were adopted several years ago. But in order to do that, the statute says that you can only charge impact fees for projects that have been included in the capital budget and program. So that's a criteria. In order to charge those fees, they do have to be part of an adopted program. Mm-hmm. And also a lot of grant applications do require that we submit a capital improvement plan to show that the town is looking ahead. It's not just one project that came out of nowhere and we want a grant for it, to show that it's been in the plan, in some cases maybe for several years. It helps you get grant funding for capital projects from there. What's the definition of a capital project? What do we include in the plan? By statute, the definition is a physical betterment or improvement. Again, it's fixing something or making it better. It can include studies related to capital projects. If you're doing an analysis, like for the sewer expansion plan, that would be a preliminary study that could be considered part of a capital project. Purchasing land or rights in land are defined by statute to be capital projects. They do not include personnel, so it's basically stuff, capital items that you would be building, you can see and touch. In terms of this version that we've started with, for the 6-year plan, split between the 3 categories, you can see most of the projects are in the general fund. But again, this is not to imply that all of those are going to be funded by user fees and taxes, because a lot of our assumptions are these projects will only happen if we can get grant funding for them. But just to get an idea of what the breakdown is between the different categories that we have in this particular first draft anyway. And then just kind of going through the laundry list of projects. I'm not going to go through all of them because it's probably close to 100 in terms of everything from replacing highway trucks to replacing Bay Road Bridge. But again, in terms of some of the projects that the department heads brought forward in terms of wanting to look at seriously within the next 5 years, replacing the beach house at the town beach. You've heard that before. The rec committee is very interested in continuing that, I think, right, from a committee member. So it's something that we certainly want to keep on our planning horizon. We're seeing some needs. You'll be seeing this in the operating budget in the police department. They have their vintage of radios are outdated. The key now is to be able to communicate with other departments, not just within your own. The radios we've got do not have that capability, so you'll see Chief Noble coming in with a fairly significant request, about $200,000 to upgrade the radio system. Unfortunately, you can't do a few this year, a few next year. You really need to do it as a wholesale change for training purposes and consistency so that everybody has the same capability. So that's kind of a preview of what you'll see for that. Also, building security. They talked about that some last year. Camera monitoring within the building, and also with the reconfiguration of office space, we are looking at potentially bulletproof glass for office space. The way we're configured now, there is a need for that. In the communications area, we do dispatch for 36 different agencies. It's a pretty complex communication system with repeaters and antennas and all of that. Some of that equipment needs to be upgraded again to keep that quality of service for the agencies that we dispatch for. Some of whom, and those costs would be certainly spread over the agencies as well when that gets put into place. Fire and rescue facilities, land acquisition, that's in the plan at this point. No surprise, that's the discussion that we're having right now about where to site a fire and rescue station. With the fire department, they are looking at replacing the marine boat within this 5-year period, and also the water tanker would be probably 20 years plus overdue for replacement. And also they do have for both fire, police, and rescue again upgrading radios to current technology. They have all departments have that in terms of their plan for upgrades within the next 5 years, certainly. The Platte River Bridge, that's been in the capital plan. It's not going away. We do have evaluations done from time to time that say it meets standards, but it's one of those projects we really don't want to lose sight of, and I think probably need to be proactive on in terms of when do we want it to plan on upgrading it, because it's going to be a long process to do engineering analysis and all of that. That's a critical link in that part of town, and if that bridge is not available, then there's certainly creates some serious issues for some of the residents in that area. We don't want to just wait for state grants to come along. I think we should really be looking at doing some planning and thinking ahead for replacement of that bridge. We know it's going to happen, and again, it sort of comes and goes, but we need to keep that, again, our plan. Paul would like to pave Pond Road. That's a project that he's been advocating for a number of years, again, with dust and potholes and just the normal maintenance costs, grading and all of that. So he would definitely like to see that happen within the next year. And again, just routine replacements of highway trucks, equipment, things like that. Buildings and Grounds has requested some trail maintenance equipment. I think that's long overdue if you think of the network of paths that we've got right now. What do we do if we have a washout? How do we access it? And I think also as a vehicle for emergency response, if we have an incident on Bay Park Path, can we get out there quickly with our vehicles, or would we need something to assist with that? So I think that's a worthwhile thing that you'll be seeing a request for probably within the next budget year that comes up. As you know, we do have a grant in place for a sidewalk path going up Irish Hill to Thompson Road. That's underway right now with some of the planning that Dean's working on, and the funding for design work is currently ongoing. We've talked about Bay Road. Sure.
Is that synced up with the bridge replacement?
That's part of the
timing wise within
the Platte Bridge.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That's part of the project.
Okay, good.
To connect that. And I think that's actually where they're starting, is to.
So is the
look at
bridge
the bridge
replacement
design.
a separate?
That's, I
investment?
believe, part of the grant, at least as far as the
Okay.
engineering work they're doing
Okay.
now. I'd have to double check with Dean, but I think they are starting with that piece of it, and then the path up to Thompson Road would be following that. Bay Road corridor, where we put a connector in between the fishing access and the Bay Road park access, those kinds of improvements we're looking at. And again, the big issue, stormwater, 1.85 million in projects that Chris has identified so far within this 5-year window. And again, looking at the water department, they've got an aging pipeline system that they are looking at some replacements for. The downfall of that is if you don't do anything, then you start having line breaks like we did with Spear Street. So we want to try to avoid that. So Rick does have some significant projects that he's looking at doing. And then within the wastewater sewer department, what's in this plan right now would be the collection system improvements, which we know we're going to need regardless of how the treatment plants are resolved in terms of keeping them here or sending to South Burlington. So Chris feels that we're looking at almost a $2 million or a little over $1 million investment in collection system where we've got infiltration and inflow problems. And the sewer plant consolidation study, that's another piece. Again, studying at this point, but we will have to be making a decision on that probably within the next six months as to which way we want to go with that. So the next steps to review and revise the priority list. I haven't really had a chance to go through it with Lee at this point in terms of moving projects around, looking at years where we've got probably too much investment, trying to spread those out so it's not doing a lot in one year and then nothing the next. By statute, we do have to review the plan with the Planning Commission and get their feedback. And it does require a public hearing and adoption. So that's where we're at right now. You do have a pretty comprehensive list. We will be back once we've talked with Lee and revise it based on his input and try to zero in on what the near-term projects are and long-term projects and get the board's feedback. Are they in the right place? Do we have the right priority? So that's where we'd be looking for your and the public input. So that's just a nutshell as to where we're at right now. Certainly, if you see any projects that are in that you feel shouldn't be, or vice versa that we're missing, let us know, and we'll be back with the next revision at the next meeting. So.
Did we? I do have one big question. Did we not include the fire rescue construction because it's too speculative, or?
I think Lee's comment was he thought that it would potentially be beyond the 5-year window. The land acquisition is in there, but as far as the actual
Yes,
So
the
the
900
does
in
the
there.
rescue department agree with that?
Well, we haven't discussed it directly with them,
Okay.
but you
I
know,
mean-
that's something we would certainly visit with them
right.
before the next review.
Yeah, I mean that seems like a long time too.
Yeah, I agree. I was
Right.
Pretty
went
conspicuous.
with Lee's perspective on it at
Yeah.
this point. So, but I'll certainly revive.
The other
revisit
piece that it
with
looked
them.
like a gap to me was around the village traffic safety improvements where we just sort of fall off, right? Like we had 10K, and I think at least I thought we had contemplated additional capital investments, and whether it was sidewalk related or what Jeff had presented to the board, not necessarily that concept, but something along the lines of really in some ways reconfiguring the sidewalk.
And that's certainly something we can include. I didn't have enough information to include any
Yeah, we may
specific
not have enough
projects at
info
this
yet,
point,
but I do think we should just
But no, that's a
reach
fair
out to
point.
Jeff
that,
too.
that could certainly be included.
I
with
think
the-
we can anticipate it. We're going to get some proposals from the group, but at the time this was done, obviously there hadn't been such input. So
Well, I think, and even at a broader perspective, what about other areas of town?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
We know there are areas where bike traffic can be a little
Yeah,
dangerous.
exactly.
Yeah, well, we have Falls Road. I mean, that's a big investment we're making with
Yeah.
that, and we
Right.
have. I mean, that's short money when it's 80% grant funded. So the more of those we can do,
Exactly.
all day long,
Yep.
if we're able to
And that
find those
connects
kind
a
of
large
projects.
population to
Yeah,
the town center.
exactly.
Right.
So
exactly.
it's all good. That project.
And that's the trick of marrying those grants with the projects
Yes.
that are our priorities.
Yeah.
How,
So-
so Peter, how do you rank relatively the projects? I mean, what criteria do you use to decide which projects gets bumped up the list, so to speak?
It's a subjective process for sure. It's based on input. I think public safety issues would probably be first, or
Yeah.
would be higher priority. And again, what's in the town plan? We look at that and what are its priorities, and make sure that we're linking capital projects with items identified as recommendations in the town plan.
And the process would be you and Lee and managers would put that information together and bring it to the board?
That's our first step, and then look for board input and public input as well in terms of, well, we think this project has a higher priority and should be, and then the board ultimately will adopt a plan based on the feedback that you get.
And the plan is a suggested path, but
Yep.
not a, we're
It's
not.
only funded for the first year because that's the adopted budget we're in right now.
Right.
Anything else is subject to grants. We do assume a lot of grants, and if they don't happen, then the project doesn't take place.
All right.
Some of the items, some of the capital items are on scheduled, year by year, putting money away,
Yeah.
replacing. But you're absolutely right. The question is, at some point, we have to decide whether capital should be allocated to radios or to fix the roof. And that assumes at some point we can't do, we're aware we can't do both.
Right.
So, as usual, Peter, great
Yes.
piece of
So
work.
this comes back to us after the planning commission?
We'll probably bring it back to you to try to zero in on, does this project profile look okay? And then once
Okay.
the board's sort of comfortable with it, then we'd probably take it to the planning commission and then
Yeah.
bring it back to the board for final adoption.
Yeah. And how does, I know you spent some time on this, how does the sort of mini project of capital investments for town infrastructure like buildings, right? I know we had talked a lot about that.
Yeah, we
How do
have, we
how do
don't
make
have
sure
that.
We're not in a constantly.
That whole
catch-up
question
mode,
of
or we-
facility
yes,
maintenance,
yes,
we have a
that-
whole.
Which I think was
yeah.
part of Lee's, one of Lee's goals,
Yeah,
maybe.
Lee has he has not yet had an opportunity to circulate the results of his survey. I know he's done some assessment in this building.
Right.
But you're right, that's another big
Facilities,
piece.
that's what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's another big piece of facility maintenance, which there's some indication here that it's superficial. I mean, it's up on the surface in terms of trail maintenance, which is an outstanding. And recall, we talked about trails as facilities, so that's another big piece that we'll enter.
And we are looking at this building too. I know Darwin has some projects in here to do some improvements.
Energy improvements or
Yeah, Lee is on it with the energy improvements. He's definitely going to be talking with Efficiency Vermont. I think he's had a walkthrough already with them. So he'll see that in here, and we've got it included as a line item too.
I think the value of the next several iterations, which they take, if they take a actual produced form or not, but even in our understanding, is to make sure we've captured everything, because we're as good allocating if we've got everything in front of us.
Yes.
And
Much
so,
easier for us to cut.
yeah, so we lay it, we be sure everything is in there, and then we can start the process. So it may mean extending years, it may mean seeking grants only, it may mean we'll get a sense of what the capital burden is, and Peter will provide us with the interest burden as usual, and we have a big consideration with the site and so on and so on. So,
Peter, can I ask just one? What's the definition of an impact fee?
It's a statutory definition. So basically, it's an impact fee would be where you would be making an investment in a capital project that future residents would be benefiting from. For instance, the recreation fields, we have an impact fee for that. It was determined that based on population growth projections, we would need more fields. And we developed an impact fee that new residents or new residential construction would be paying an impact fee as part of their building permit. That gets put into a fund. That fund pays for capital improvements.
I see.
Some of which were done in advance. The playing fields down on Harbor Road, a good example. Those are being funded by impact fees.
Are those separate from the general fund?
It's sort of a different it's within the general fund, but it's a different category that's reserved just for that purpose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all right, any
And
further?
it has to have a specific designation, right?
It has to be for
Yeah.
specific projects, right? You can't just charge an impact fee for
Future.
Future
nothing
stuff that we
defined.
haven't thought of.
Yeah.
It's got to
Yeah.
be a capital
Although that
project.
sounds
Yeah.
like a good idea.
Right. But on the other hand, you know, you do put money aside for projects. I mean, we put money into the highway equipment fund every year. That's not
Yeah.
an impact fee.
But for
Yeah.
instance, wastewater treatment facility, we could begin to think about an impact fee.
And actually, we do charge a fee to recover the cost of the prior plant expansion.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's an element in the municipal utility, I mean, in terms of the financing. Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Peter.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Great
and I'm
work
sure
as
you'll
always.
welcome comments at pretty much any time. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Peter. Any questions? Hearing none. The next item is the budget development schedule, which Lee has provided us. And again, I think the consensus is that we agree with Lee on his suggestion that the CIP and budget be consolidated at a point for review, Peter. The schedule looks to me like my personal take looks fine, Mike?
Yeah, it looks fine to
Yeah,
me.
agree.
No, I
I
just put
didn't.
that away.
I guess my only comment was last year, I think we had allocated a couple of meetings after the town manager introduces the budget proposal, so that the board can deliberate on whether they agree or disagree with the town manager's submittal. And I didn't see those here. I mean, we've got the all-day session,
Yeah.
public hearing, but I didn't see any meetings where it was basically the select board's agenda to discuss the budget.
You know, we had 3 meetings in a row, 3 weeks in a row.
Right.
And some of that was simply to accommodate the holidays, because we didn't feel there was anything productive about meeting the last week and even the first few days of January. So, but I would assume it's enough for us to note that there could well be additional meetings as required.
I mean,
in
last
that
year we
period.
had January 8th and 10th, there were two budget meetings just to
Yeah.
discuss the budget from the select board's perspective.
Yeah.
So I was just
What's
thinking.
the
we might-
difference between those meetings and the 10th and 11th?
The 11th is an all-day, where all the departments come
Is
and
departmental
tell it and explain
submissions,
their-
and then the later one is the formed-up budget.
I see. So
Yeah.
we have a completed draft budget before us and we debate the merits of individual components. I see.
You know, it's really a constant process, but this looks fine to me.
Yeah, I'm okay with the schedule as well. We can always layer in more meetings if.
Yeah.
I think, Jerry, you had pointed out the all-day budget was December
11.
12th.
11th.
Yeah.
Was it 12th? that we
Well, it
did?
was the 12th last year, and I think I asked that we move it to the 11th.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's
We're
actually.
now, we're now
Okay.
December 11.
All right.
You know, I checked in
And
with
I
Peter to be sure.
Yeah, and I've specifically arranged my.
And you're
work
okay with
schedule.
that, right?
Yeah, I specifically arranged my work schedule. So
Right.
that it's the
Okay.
11th.
All
I
right.
just want to make sure that's right.
Okay, is there a motion to approve this as presented?
I'll move to approve the presented capital,
Mike moves to
Budget
approve it
planning
as
section.
presented.
Second.
Jamie seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The next item is to appoint Colleen, Haag, and Lee Krohn as authorized representatives to draw funds from the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank Series 2016-1 Library Town Hall Loan. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Jamie moves. Colleen seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
This just needs Jerry's signature as chair.
We want to be sure we sign it. The next item are 2 wastewater allocations, which Lee has noted for us. Is there any discussion?
Move to approve the following wastewater allocations. Lisserog for Barberry Lane, 210 gallons per day for a single-family home, and APC Properties, 2800 Shelburne Road, 210 gallons per day for a single-family home.
Thank you. Jamie moves.
Second.
Colleen seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The next item is a liquor license renewal, for which we will need a motion at the start to convene ourselves as the liquor license board.
So moved.
So moved by Colleen.
Second.
Seconded by Jamie. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. We are now convened as the board. And in this case, it's the Waterfront Catering Group at the Shelburne Museum, third-class license.
So moved.
Moved
to approve.
by Colleen to approve.
Second.
Seconded by Jamie. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay.
This needs to
Is
be
there a
signed
motion
by the
to
board.
resume the general session?
So moved.
Jamie moves, Colleen seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The next item is the executive session, for which we have our standard routine two motions. Would someone like to make those?
Pursuant to 1 VSA 313, I move to find that premature general public knowledge of the town's strategy in negotiating or securing of real estate purchase or lease options would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Jamie moves. Colleen seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Pursuant to 1 VSA 313, I move to enter executive session to evaluate the town's strategy in negotiating or securing of real estate purchase or lease options, and to invite the finance director and town attorney to participate.
Second.
Seconded by Colleen. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Thank you. To resume general session. Mike moves. Colleen seconds. Hearing no discussion. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. Thank you.
Okay. So I'd like to move to appoint and authorize myself to complete negotiation of an amendment to purchase and sale agreement between the town of Shelburne and Healthy Living Market and Cafe, and to also authorize me to approve the developer selection as reflected in the amendment.
So moved by Jamie, seconded by Colleen. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Move to adjourn.
Colleen moves to adjourn.
Second.
Mike seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.